Hello all, this is going to be a review for Anatomy 2, Test 3, specifically in regard to digestion and nutrition. Alright, first things first. If I were you, I would be able to very generally diagram out the digestive tract from top to bottom and sort of walk me through and tell me what does what in general fashion. Where do you have mechanical digestion taking place? Where do you have chemical digestion taking place? Where does mechanical digestion primarily take place? Where does chemical digestion primarily take place? Where would absorption primarily take place? And I mean breaking down the intestines, for example, into all of their small derivations. I want to know all about it. Alright, so generally speaking, tell me how digestion works. On more specifics, explain to me how you take food and break it down into smaller parts, and then you take that mechanically broken down food and then chemically break it down using, for instance, like hydrolysis reactions. Be able to walk me through all of the different major enzymes involved in chemical digestion and sort of tell me where they all come from and where they go into play. Alright? So just be able to run me through all these major parts and pieces. In terms of the digestive system, explain to me the parts of the alimentary canal itself. Like, who all is involved in this, and what are the parts and pieces there? Tell me about how we absorb nutrients. Tell me how we then eliminate waste products. And tell me about the musculature inside of the alimentary canal. So, where would you find circular muscle and longitudinal muscle? Tell me how the stomach is very different from the intestines. Describe to me the concept of peristalsis and those rhythmic contractions that propel things from one place to the next. Further, walk me through the accessory organs. Tell me about salivary glands. Tell me about teeth. Tell me about how you might have issues with those teeth. What are cavities? And is it just a matter of the teeth degrading, or are there other further downsides potentially to this? So just walk me through some of these accessory organs and give me some information. Tell me about the lining of the stomach itself. Can anything get through the stomach, or is it, pretty well regulated? Tell me about how the stomach is quite well protected from the acidity that is there. But, walk me through that we describe some things that can actually pass through the unique wall of the stomach and get directly into the bloodstream. So just kind of tell me about the stomach, tell me about the mucosal lining that's there, and kind of explain to me how things work. Use terms like a bolus. What's a bolus? Explain to me what chyme is. Tell me about what moves through and at what rate it moves through. Do materials move through the stomach very quickly, and are they led into the small intestine in mass, or is it small amounts per unit of time? Just walk me through these concepts. And further, in reference to chyme, tell me about the pH in the stomach, the pH of materials as they enter the small intestine, and the pH of materials as they move through the small intestine, and explain to me how we regulate this. So, what is bicarbonate? When would you secrete bicarbonate? What elicits that response? Like, tell me how we buffer out some of that pH that's taking place, or the acidity, you might say, that's taking place there. Be able to explain to me the layering in the intestine. Like, what's a lumen? What's a mucosa? What's a submucosa? What are these for? What is the serosa, and how is it functioning on the outside there? Just walk me through the layers of the intestine and just some basic information on that front. I know that I'm jumping all over the place here, folks, but this is just how my notes function. Tell me about the tongue. Tell me about how it is musculature and how it moves things around to form the bolus that we were describing previously. Tell me about the papillae on the tongue, and walk me through where they are found and what they're for. Give me their names, and some of these are for taste, others are for texture. Like, just give me an idea of sort of how this functions. Further, walk me through saliva. Tell me about the different types of saliva. Tell me about what is found inside of saliva and some of the surprises therein, and how all of this sort of works together to form these round ovoid masses that we would use as a bolus to propel things from one place to the next. Tell me about the enzymes, generally speaking, in the mouth. Tell me about what they can do, what they break down, where they are active. The enzymes and digestion are so darn important. You certainly need to be friends with this. In the stomach, tell me about intrinsic factor and its importance to vitamin B12 absorption and why all that matters. Tell me about the lining of the stomach and the gastric pits that are there and the important compounds that they are, in essence, making. Tell me about how the stomach acts in mechanical digestion to move things around and propel materials from one place to the next while homogenizing them, forming that kind that we think of. All right, once we move into the small intestine, tell me about the role of the pancreas and the liver here, right? In reference specifically to the pancreas. Tell me about how we regulate the secretions from the pancreas. What does the pancreas release? Tell me about the materials moving through there. Tell me about the enzymes that it makes. What triggers the release of specific chemicals from the pancreas? I want to know all about it. In the liver, tell me about bile. Tell me about how bile is stored and where bile is stored. Tell me what we use bile for. What is the term emulsification? What are lacteals in the intestines and how do they interact? What is their relationship to bile being an emulsifier and lacteals? Tell me about what all of this is for. And generally speaking, tell me what is what's included in bile. So what all is inside of there and kind of where does it come from? It's a breakdown product of something else. Tell me about it. All right. A lot of the enzymes that we release into our small intestine are in the form of zymogens. I want to know what zymogens are, and I want to know how they become active. Why is it that you produce enzymes in the form of zymogens? Why don't pancreatic enzymes like big proteases, why don't they just destroy the pancreas where they're found? How do they become activated elsewhere? Right? Walk me through the concept. So the small intestine is very, very important for this. Tell me about its absorptive capacity. Tell me about the amazing surface area of the small intestines. Give me the how and the why of this. Like, what are villi? What are microvilli? How does this look? Why is it doing what it does? All right, tell me about its absorptive capacity. Tell me about the different parts of the small intestine. Like, where would you find Brunner's glands? Where would you find Peyer's patches? Where is digestion happening? Where is absorption happening? You know, what's happening where in terms of the different parts of the small intestine? And give me the lengths of these parts of the small intestine. Certainly worthwhile. Generally speaking, tell me about goblet cells. Tell me about mucus in the intestinal tract. Mucus in the stomach, for that matter. Tell me about the role that mucus plays in different areas of the intestines. Like, what is the point in the large intestine of having lots and lots of goblet cells? Walk me through this as a process. And then, in terms of the large intestine, tell me what it's for. What are feces? Like what literally are feces? What is involved there? What are the percentages of things that make materials up that are there? And can we absorb certain things through the large intestine? Potentially. It's a complicated question, but potentially. And then be able to walk me through some digestive disorders. So we talked at length about some problems in the large intestine that we can see. We talked a little bit about some structures inside and around there. So for instance, tell me about the appendix and what's the role of the appendix in our system. Like, all of these things are fair game. Tell me about diarrhea and why the appendix might be of worth there. How is it that you can live without it? Like, these are all fair game style questions. And that will move us on to nutrition. So, in specifics, you need to be able to tell me about refined grains versus complex carbohydrates, for that matter. So what are refined grains? What are complex carbohydrates? What is the problem with the high amounts of refined grains that we see in our diet today? Why are refined grains a problem? What is meant when I'm talking about insulin spikes and how this affects the way that the body stores energy? I want to know about how refined grains are different from more complex carbohydrates. So for that matter, why are refined grains so darn prevalent now? What led us to being where we are? All right, proteins. Tell me about complete proteins versus incomplete proteins and their sources. So where do we get our proteins? Is it animal materials? Is it plant materials? Are all animal materials going to contain the amino acids we need? Do all plant materials contain the amino acids we need? So again, complete versus incomplete sources of these proteins, these amino acids, and just walk me through the basic concepts of animal versus plant proteins and some of the ideas therein. All right, you are all headed towards some sort of medical future, I assume. I want to know the percentage of Americans that are overweight, the percentage of Americans who are type 2 diabetic. I want to know about how diet affects this. How does the food sources that we have coming in, how do they play a role in some of these real issues that we're seeing these days in terms of human health in these United States? Tell me about the leading cause of death in the U.S. and what you can do about it. How can you mediate your risk factors, if you will? And for that matter, tell me about trans fats versus omega-3 fatty acids. Okay, what are trans fats? Are they good for you or are they bad for you? Where do you see them? What's the issue? Tell me about omega-3s, good for you or bad for you, and where do you get them? And for that matter, tell me about consuming fish overall. So fish are a wonderful source of omega-3 fatty acids, but they're also high protein and generally speaking low fat. So tell me about some of the benefits of having at least 1 or 2 meals a week that are fish-based on your, for instance, saturated fat levels versus unsaturated fat levels, I suppose. So just walk me through the idea of this in terms of heart disease. For that matter, tell me about HDL versus LDL, so high-density lipoproteins versus low-density lipoproteins. Give me an idea of what's good for you and what's bad for you, and sort of where you would fall dependent upon your diet. And then, kind of last but not least, walk me through the idea of vitamins versus minerals and give me examples. So what's a vitamin? Give me examples. What are minerals? Give me examples of these. And that should be a really good start in terms of pointing you, I should say, in the right direction for this exam. I know that I kind of jumped all around on this review, but hopefully you can organize and kind of get things where you need them. All right, thank you so much. I hope you do extraordinarily well on your exams, and have a great day.